Good evening. We're starting in Genesis chapter 13, verse 1. So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had. Remember how much he had received from the Egyptians because of Sarai, and Lot with him into the Negev. So Abram had come down through Negev to go to Egypt because of the famine, and afterwards went back up through the Negev after that was finished. Now Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. And he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites dwelt in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left." Now this shows the honor and humility of Abram, because Lot was his nephew, but he gave Lot first choice of the land where he wanted to dwell. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Now the author here is giving us a reminder. Remember the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is how it starts. This is kind of a moral lesson. Verse 11, so Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, while Lot dwelt among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now, this is where we would hear kind of that menacing background music, dun, 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 if there was a soundtrack to scripture, because of two things that the author is pointing out. In scripture, there's a difference between cities and the country. And usually the cities represented wickedness, sinfulness, and living out in the country meant having to rely upon God. And so the fact that it's pointed out Lot chose to live among the cities, obviously it's pointing out, oh, Lot chose, to go off to the city into a land of wickedness, and Abram stayed out in the country. The second thing is obviously the reference to Sodom, that this is how that is being set up. And just in case the reader doesn't remember the Sodom and Gomorrah story, the author reminds them in the next verse. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. Verse 14, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give to you and to your descendants forever. I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your descendants also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and came and dwelt by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Over and over, we have this instance wherever Abram settles, even if it's just temporarily, he builds an altar to the Lord. He does this for the purpose of giving thanks to God for what has happened in his life, but also for worshiping God. The altar is where he would burn sacrifices to God as an act of worship. It's important that we remember to give thanks to God and to worship God wherever we are, and to make that a part of our daily lives. I hope that you are finding devotion time each and every day, carving that out, especially during this time where we're kind of set apart from each other. Make time for God. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.